Hello, good evening, and welcome to Normal Island Live. I'm Curtis Daly, and I'm joined by the amazing and fantastic Barry Malone. Barry, it's your first time on Normal Island this year.
Yeah. Thanks for the kind words. Amazing and fantastic.
Yeah, you get both.
My wife would disagree with you on both counts, but I will take it. Thank you. No, it's great to be here again. Yeah, first time this year.
Yes, really excited for tonight's show. We've got 4 stories, and I know, Barry, you're going to be fantastic. I'm going to go through all of them. This is what we've got coming up tonight. Stella Creasy attacks the Greens over Trident and the US. The Daily Mail author calls for Trump to take over the UK. Shabana Mahmood says she wants the state to have eyes on us at all times. And the IDF stormed UNRWA headquarters. You can help us grow by visiting turnleftmedia.co.uk/support to help fund our work, or by becoming a YouTube member. But on to our first story. Labour MP Stella Creasy made a video talking about NATO and Trident, but within it, she went after the Green Party.
We've all met those people who can make a bad situation fundamentally worse by their actions. And in this current crisis caused by President Trump's frankly bullying over his demands for Greenland and Denmark, we've all met those people who can make a bad situation fundamentally worse by their actions. And in this current crisis caused by President Trump's frankly bullying over his demands for Greenland and Denmark, it's no different. The Greens are advocating that this country should kick American bases off UK soil and ditch Trident, as if either action would resolve this conflict or make us safer as a nation as a result. The reverse is true. It could damage valuable security and intelligence relationships that we have with America that also help us tackle the terrorist threats that we face. Ditching Trident, our nuclear deterrent, unilaterally is the last thing our European counterparts want us to do at this moment in time. It would mean that only France was left as a nuclear power in Europe. Ask President Putin what assessment he would make of the weakness of Europe as a result. What sounds like a great idea in the echo chamber of social media disintegrates on hard contact in talking to our German or Polish or Danish counterparts, those people at the front line with Russia, about their security needs. It is not the way to strengthen Europe at this critical moment in time. Because it is true that NATO is struggling. Those valuable relationships that we have relied on to keep us safe and to keep the peace for generations are in peril. But the answer isn't to walk away or trying to provoke further conflict. The answer is to find ways of strengthening and renewing those relationships. Now is not the time for posturing. It's the time for politics, bringing people together, collaborating, and working out how collectively we stand up to the bullies wherever they exist.
In response, Zach Polanski linked to his article in the New Statesman outlining his position. First, we need to disentangle our security apparatus from the United States so that we can be genuinely independent. As an urgent first step, the government should review how we might remove US bases from British soil while maintaining our own security and retaining the capacity to support our allies in Ukraine. If Trump were to take military action against Greenland, we must be able to act swiftly to remove America's military presence from our country peacefully and efficiently. The government should also cancel its £240 million deal with US firm Palantir, signed despite MPs raising serious security concerns about the company. Second, we need to ditch Trident, and fast. Even supporters of nuclear weapons recognise the risk of maintaining a system that relies on the United States. Billions have already been spent on Trident renewal, but we must not fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy. The government should immediately pause the renewal and bring a full debate to Parliament on whether we wish to spend billions of pounds on a weapon system that cannot operate without US support. This then began an exchange between the two, getting a little bit personal on Twitter. Stella Creasy wants to renew and strengthen our relationship with Donald Trump in this silly political attack video. Is it any surprise her vote share plummeted and the Green Party rose? We'll take it all the way next time. Stella Creasy came back and said, It's getting to be a habit that the Greens make misleading statements about opponents and use them to try to provoke abuse. In this video, I call Trump a bully and argue we should focus on strengthening Europe, something which Zach's proposals for how to react explicitly undermines. When he shows yet again he doesn't know what he's talking about, believe him the first time. It's the same Labour playbook over and over again. 1. Attack the Green Party. 2. Turn replies off. 3. Accuse others of abuse. People see through it. Walthamstow can't replace their MP soon enough. She came back, though. Polanski has been caught out again. No doubt he will have to try to row back on the folly it will be for Europe's security for the UK to unilaterally disarm our nuclear deterrent right now, because he can't defend such a stance as this conduct shows. Labour are complicit in a genocide. Labour are pretending we have a nuclear deterrent despite the fact it doesn't work and relies on Donald Trump. And all the while, they've got nothing substantial to say because they've tied our national security to the USA, some patriots. And Stella Creasy finally comes back and says, increasingly unhinged posts from this man, proving my point. Emotion not going to get Europe out of this situation. Proposing things like suddenly scrapping Trident means owning the consequences, not just shouting when people point them out. It also drowns important questions of how we make our security stronger with Europe, which is the subject of my original video. And to be honest, questioning my patriotism is what I usually get from the alt-right trolls. Alt-right, I mean, we've not really heard that term for a long time. We just say far-right and right-wing. I think it's an astonishing claim there. Look, people can have political disagreements on the existence of Trident, whether we should unilaterally get rid of them or not. But what I find extremely funny is that Stella Creasy is calling Zach Polanski unhinged, when first of all, he's rightfully calling out their dog shit foreign policy, enabling a genocide, sucking up to Donald Trump. I mean, we've witnessed over the last year Keir Starmer bend over and kiss Trump's feet. And what have we had in response? Tariffs. With the first round of tariffs. Then Keir Starmer continues to be a lapdog for Donald Trump. We now have a second round of tariffs, 10%, rising to 25%, because we want to stand, apparently, with Greenland. And I think it's kind of crazy to me that Stella Creasy is lecturing Zach Polanski on something which is really important to point out. Trident and our nuclear weapons is not independent. It's literally owned by the US. And I find it funny as well with Stella Creasy saying, well, Keir Starmer's held Trump to account. I called him a bully in my video. You're a backbench MP, right? You're not in cabinet. You're no one important. Calling him a bully in a video in which he's not going to see means nothing. And this is what the Liberals do. They'll say certain words, they'll pretend to be harsh, but when it comes down to holding power to account, they do absolutely nothing. Barry, what do you think of Creasy's attacks? I mean, she's your MP. Now, she believes scrapping Trident unilaterally is a bad idea. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think, yes, she is my MP, and I think I know the reason why she attacks the Greens all the time. And that's because she's in danger in this constituency, which, Zach Polanski, I guess, hinted at in the exchange they had. I actually put the stats on my screen here. In the last election, she got... Now, bearing in mind, Walthamstow was one of the safest Labour seats in the entire country, right? Not just in London, in the entire country. So the last election, she got 59.5% of the vote, which was a drop of 16.6%. The Labour candidate, Rosalind Rowlands, got 20% of the vote, which was an increase of 16.5%, right? So the Greens went up 16.5%. Stella Creasy came down 16.6%. And that's with the Greens running effectively a paper campaign. I mean, no disrespect to Rosalind Rowlands, I'm sure she's great, but she doesn't have any online presence. If you Google her, you literally don't find anything. They didn't leaflet, they didn't canvass because they didn't have the capacity to do so. And yet still they ate nearly 17% of her vote. And things have only gotten worse, I think, since. And, Green Party activists will mount a campaign here next time. They've said that. And they're already out campaigning and knocking on doors in the neighborhood. And I think it's having a really, really positive impact. And you've seen increasingly since Zach Polanski became the leader of the Green Party, her sort of lashing out at them. And I do think she's very vulnerable here. She is a very present MP in the community, and I think that the Greens have acknowledged that it's kind of the work that she does on the ground, the fact that a lot of people in Walthamstow think that she's a good constituency MP. But I'm getting to the stage now where I think that the fact that she's a Labour MP is hurting her really, really badly. I actually, on another count, I think Gaza's been a big issue for her also in this neighbourhood. And I had a couple of guys come around, a couple of very young electricians to do something in my house. And they raised with me, did I know that one of the Palestine Action Hunger Strikers was from Walthamstow, and that they'd been around doing some work in a house, and that they'd heard from her parents about this. I'm sorry, I can't recall her name right now. And that gets around the neighborhood too, Read the argument with Zach Polanski on Trident. I didn't think that she was making much sense at all. And I actually thought that she was misrepresenting his position rather than the other way around. Because if you read his piece in the New Statesman, it's actually quite nuanced. Yes, he's saying that we need to scrap Trident fast, but he's not sort of saying close the bases, chuck out Trident. He's saying that the UK faces very real security challenges. He said that, and he's also talked about the challenge from climate change, and he's talked about how the country needs to be safe. And in fact, he used a line that I think you more often hear from sort of centrist, more mainstream parties, which is that the first responsibility of government is to keep its people safe. Right? He said that. He said that clearly in the piece. So, I think that he has a nuanced position. And the other thing that she misrepresented is the argument for closing US military bases and the argument for scrapping Trident, whether you're, as he said, in favor of nuclear weapons or not, is that it's tied, as you say, to the United States. I think the missiles have to go back to the US for maintenance every few years. The UK does manufacture the warheads, but one of the key components of the warhead is also manufactured in the United States. And the argument that Polanski and others are making is the UK can't, Europe can't rely on the US as an ally anymore. And so if you can't rely on this country as an ally, why would you maintain a nuclear deterrent that's dependent on that country? It makes no sense. And I don't think that and why would she build that nuance into the argument that she was having with him? I felt she was misrepresenting him.
I think it's very interesting that in her sort of social media back and forth with Zach, she was saying, well, you're very much online. You're drumming up social media support. You can rely on black and white stuff. As an MP who's worked around government, I have more nuance here, which is ironic because, as you pointed out, when you read Zach's piece in the New Statesman, it's very ironic. In fact, he was speaking to the country because he wasn't talking about, obviously his position is to scrap Trident unilaterally, but he was saying very clearly, even if you are in favor of keeping them, I'm speaking to you too. And the truth is, we don't have independence over these nuclear weapons. You are right. They have to go back to the US for maintenance. So it makes no sense. And in terms of US bases, I mean, it's crazy. And this is just imperialism. I mean, embassies, fine. We should have good relationships with all countries, but US military bases?
There's a lot of them. It's like 10,000 troops or something. Yeah. This is an aside. But I highly recommend to all the viewers to watch, if they haven't already, an amazing drama from 1988 called A Very British Coup, which actually covers exactly this topic, where an old Union leftist from the north of England becomes
Harry Perkins.
Yes, well done.
Yes,
and the first thing he wants to do is to close all the US military bases, and then in come the US and British intelligence agencies to make his life quite difficult. It's really, really excellent, and yeah, that was made decades ago, and this is still kind of a topic of conversation on the left, right?
I agree. It's a fantastic not documentary. It's based on the book, but it could be real. By Chris Mullins, wasn't it? Yes. I got a question for you though. What did you think? I've not read the book, but I know how the book ends. They changed the ending. Spoilers, in the book, the nukes go off.
Is that
Whereas,
right? I didn't know that. I didn't know it was
yeah.
written from the book.
So the nukes go off in the book, which is quite
I
interesting.
did not know
Whereas obviously in the
that.
show,
Okay.
it doesn't happen.
Curtis, you're spoiling.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I mean, it was written in the early 80s, so come
Yeah,
on,
it's
guys.
by
What did
a
it?
former Labour MP, right, Chris Mullins, who also has written some very good diaries of his time as a
Mm.
politician. Yeah. Sorry, I
And
really
what?
sidetracked the conversation there, but
No, it was
I
good.
guess the point is that this has been an issue for a super long
Yes.
time in this country. Is the reliance on the US for security, and
Mm.
you know, I think for a long time people thought, well, the relationship isn't going to change, and our policies are always going to be in step, and we're always going to want to maintain the so-called international order, which is, you know, the order that only the West benefited from. But it's changed, you know, it's changed. And, you know, even when you even have the likes of Mark Carney,
Mm-hmm.
the Canadian PM,
Very interesting speech, wasn't it?
saying, and whatever you think of Mark Carney, he faced it very head on and said, "Look, this is we're in a new place now." And so again, if you're in a new place, you have to look at Trident and you have to look at the bases. Whether you're a peacenik or in favor of nuclear
Mm-hmm.
weapons, it doesn't matter. It's an issue for everybody.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right about Mark Carney. He's a liberal, but in that instance, he pretty much called it right. And where the political zeitgeist is they think the old order is still here. But we cannot trust the United States under Donald Trump. Of course, the rise of China. There's a global realignment, and I think Zach Polanski, you know, people will call him unserious, but of course, many people call you unserious if you don't agree with the political establishment. He's forward thinking. He's looking at the geological changes or the geopolitics that's changing, and yet people like Stella Creasy, they still think they're back in the world of the 90s.
Yeah,
That's just where they are, I think.
yeah, it's always
Um,
that's always the charge. You know, it's exactly right as you say. If you challenge the status quo, you're unserious or you're engaging in student politics. You
that's
know,
right.
this is the
Yeah.
thing they always throw at the Greens. You know, this isn't student politics. This isn't six. This is the real world. You know, because I think she use a phrase kind of like that when it hits up against hard reality. Zach, you know,
Yeah.
but again, she did him dirty by ignoring the nuance in the New Statesman piece, which was not a sixth form piece. It was
Mm.
a very mature, sensible, measured piece, I thought.
Well, they're clearly worried because obviously the Greens are rising, and I think they're worried that Zach is actually making sense. But excellent stuff there. We are going to move on because we've got another 3 stories to get through. Let's move on to our second story. After GB News contributors decided to stand with Donald Trump with his plans to implement tariffs against the UK, Richard Littlejohn from the Daily Mail went even further. Trump should raise his sights from Greenland and buy Britain instead. I'd take him, warts and all, over our hopeless, complete and utter lawyer of a PM any day. Yes, you read that right. A British columnist is calling for the president of the US to take over the UK. Within the article, he said this. Back when Trump first mooted the idea of buying Greenland, I wrote here, only partly in jest, that he should raise his sights and buy Britain instead. The more I think about it, the more I warm to the idea. We'd immediately become the largest state in the Union with the population of New York and California combined, and would gain the political influence which came with that. I mean, that is a wild thing to say. We're going to go more into the article in a second, but that first bit is absolutely insane. First of all, you hear what he's saying. We can be or will be the largest state of America. He's arguing to give up our national sovereignty. He's saying we shouldn't be a country anymore. We should be a state of America. These people who, by the way, we'll talk about Brexit in a second too. He supports Brexit. And one of the good arguments to leave, I mean, I vote Remain, but one of the good arguments to leave the European Union was for sovereignty because there's anti-democratic forces within the EU. And you've got these right-wing people writing in the Daily Mail and saying stuff like, well, you know, we need to leave the EU because we need our national sovereignty. And then is literally saying, actually, we shouldn't even be a country. We should just be a state and be subordinates to America. It's absolutely insane how these bootlickers operate. Now, Little John continues and claims Greenlanders will be better off under US control. Under the American flag, the 56,000 residents of Greenland would continue to enjoy as much autonomy as they do under Danish jurisdiction. Like any other US state, they'd certainly have more control over their own affairs than we did inside the EU. Now, I seriously doubt that, giving up their sovereignty to a country that doesn't even guarantee healthcare. All the current benefits Greenlanders receive will be gone. Then he brings up Brexit. When 17.4 million people voted for Brexit I'll start that again. When 17.4 million people voted for Brexit, he spent 4 years trying to overturn the result of the referendum. Now he's in Downing Street with the support of just 1 in 5 of those entitled to vote. He's deliberately unraveling the Brexit settlement by stealth without any mandate. Now, this is true. Keir Starmer, he didn't respect the results of the referendum, but that was about undermining, Labour under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. It's not through any sort of ideological bent or even principled reasoning for this. He knew that it was going to be direct opposition to Jeremy Corbyn, sort of let's stay out of the EU and trying to fight sort of the membership and the People's Vote campaign. So it was about disrupting that. It's also, again, incredibly ironic that Little John talks about Brexit when he's happy for the US to give up sovereignty, or for us to give up sovereignty to the US. Now, finally, Little John pivots to the so-called sharp mind of Trump. You may consider him a thin-skinned megalomaniac, but as Robert Hardman observed in Saturday's Mail after his brilliant up-and-close and personal audience with Trump at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, he's far from the madman his critics maintain. Nor is this 79-year-old Trump away with the fairies, Biden style, another allegation gathering momentum on the left. As Hardman reports, the Donald is as sharp as a tack, in full possession of his faculties and with the stamina of a man half his age. Oh, really? I'm sorry, but this is major cope. I mean, trying to pretend that Trump's cognitive abilities haven't been on the decline. I mean, we've all witnessed it. We've seen it, right? You don't need to be a doctor to know this. However, TikTok creator and doctor, Epistemic Crisis, has been documenting his mental decline.
Here's the President of the United States displaying classic frontotemporal dementia, that forward-leaning posture that he seems to have had for several years now. I'm a physical therapist with a doctorate in my field and 14 years experience working in home healthcare, treating geriatric patients with dementia, just like this guy. Here's another more clear example. You see the example figure up top, and then Trump during a press conference. I mean, it's basically identical. And this leaning forward posture actually differentiates frontotemporal dementia from Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's involves basically forgetting, while FTD includes confabulation, where the holes in your memory, you fill them in with lies that you make up and that you 100% believe. This explains why Trump always seems 100% confident, even though he's a fucking liar. Many of you have been asking me, what is the cause of expiration for somebody with frontotemporal dementia? And the answer is pneumonia, related to aspirating food. Because over time, as the frontal and temporal lobes atrophy, you lose the ability to effectively swallow, and then you aspirate food and develop pneumonia. I've said it before and I'll say it again. With all of these dementia symptoms piling up and his possible history of stroke, TIA, heart failure, chronic kidney disease, I say he's got 2 to 4 months left in the land of the living, or as somebody who could possibly fulfill the duties of the president. A lot of people are asking, well, can't they just prop him up for the entire 4 years? The answer is no, because the more the frontal lobe atrophies, he's going to start to do stuff that is so embarrassing, it will be impossible for him to remain president, no matter how much MAGA wants him to be. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
I would recommend checking this person's account, by the way. He's done many videos documenting Trump's cognitive decline. I mean, he has dementia, so it's quite clear. Before I go to you, Barry, I've just had an update from my producer, some breaking news. This is from Trump on Truth Social, based upon a very productive meeting that I have had with the General Secretary of NATO, Mark Rutte. We have formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland and, in fact, the entire Arctic region. This solution, if consummated, will be a great one for the United States of America and all NATO nations. Based upon this understanding, I would not be imposing the tariffs that was scheduled to go into effect on February the 1st. Additional discussions are being held concerning the Golden Dome as it pertains to Greenland. Further information will be made available as discussions progress. Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and various others, as needed, will be responsible for the negotiations. They will report directly to me. Thank you for your attention to this matter, Donald J. Trump. Now, of course, nothing in that message says a deal has been reached with Greenland. But, the General Secretary of NATO, it sounds like many Western nations have bowed down to him. Barry, we can get you to comment on Donald Trump more widely, but what's your response to this new development?
Who knows? I mean, the thing about that is how can we take that at face value without some more reporting? We don't know. He says all kinds of things on Truth Social. He's often not speaking the truth. He's often lying. It's hard to believe that some kind of substantive deal would have been done. I guess they could be talking about some change in military cooperation around the Arctic Circle. But as you said, we haven't heard anything from Denmark on this. So I think I would wait and see on the Truth Social post.
I think it's quite vague, and again, Donald Trump says anything, so we'll have to see what comes to that. Okay, let's talk about the story at hand. I want to ask you, what do you make of this phenomenon of people on the right wing who are the loudest to claim they are patriots, yet they are exposing, quite frankly, treacherous behavior?
It's completely absurd. You absolutely nailed it. It's utter madness. By the way, Richard Littlejohn, what a throwback. That guy used to be all over the screens. I guess now he's, got his feet up at the Daily Mail, just churning out reactionary columns every week. So good for him. But no, it's complete insanity. We've seen people on the right before in this country saying, I would like Donald Trump to be president. I would like Donald Trump to come over and sort things out here. But Littlejohn, as you said, just said that he would be happy. And he said that he wasn't joking, that he would be happy for the UK to give up its sovereignty, to not be a nation anymore, and not even a vassal state, but a state of the US. It's completely barmy. And you cannot square being a so-called patriot with wanting to become part of the United States instead of a nation. You cannot square about those things. They do not fit together. And similarly for the people who said that they want Trump to be involved in British governance in any way, on the far right. Again, they cannot square their patriotism with this. Also, see the BBC, right? I'm no big fan of the BBC. I've criticized them constantly for the last last 2 or more years of the Gaza war. But we saw this with Trump's threat to sue the BBC, to take the BBC down, and people on the right, not just the far right, people on kind of the center right, cheering him on, saying, yeah, do it, destroy the BBC. Again, that is not patriotic. You cannot square those two things. And I just don't know if they don't seem to understand the inherent contradiction in what they're saying. Like, beyond it being a comprehension, it's being a contradiction. It's completely insane, Curtis. It's completely mad.
Just to pick up on your point, because it's really interesting there how you were saying it's not just the right, it's the centre right. And I think that's a good point, because I think when it comes to the far right, I'm not really surprised about this. I'm not surprised that GB News is taking a pro-Trump stance over Britain, because at the end of the day, all media is, all corporate media is oligarch media, right? But GB News is the most obvious example. So for them, it's not about principle or ideas. It's about, well, Trump represents the oligarchy. We like him. That's it. I get that, and that doesn't surprise me. But people writing in the Telegraph, in the Daily Mail, who, conservatives who have been around for a very, very long time, are also echoing the same sentiment. And the one thing about conservatives, which has been lost in their ideology or in their community, is the support for institutions. I think that was something conservatism has always been about the great British institutions. These should be defended. And even something like the BBC, in which both the left and right have criticisms of. I think you're absolutely right to point out BBC, by the way, as an example of the right-wing attack in the BBC. And it's very strange to see that. I mean, you've got people almost desecrating over Churchill's legacy of, we'll ignore the racist legacy and the fashion, and then the famine legacy for a second. But in terms of the European human rights, the European Court of Human Rights, for example, and all these sort of European institutions we built together to make sure we don't sort of have conflicts. Modern conservatives and right-wingers no longer believe in that. And I find that very fascinating, that it's even leaking into the so-called mainstream conservatism.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think that I first started to hear these kinds of things when people would go and interview marchers on like the Unite the Right rally or protests outside the hotels in Epping. You would hear participants there talking about how we want Trump to come in and sort this mess, and Britain will be better under Trump, and it seemed like complete fringe nonsense, and something that you would just kind of laugh at almost. The clips would go viral because people thought that they were sort of funny and pathetic. And now you've seen it encroach into, I would say, mainstream conservatism, which, as you say, is completely bizarre, because again, when you come back to the contradiction that I see in that, where how can you be a patriot when you want to prostrate yourself before the president of another country? The Conservative Party and the Conservative movement has always traded on patriotism and nationalism and the great defenders of British values, whatever their idea of British values are. And before the kind of the flag shagging and, roundabout painting, they did always include the sort of the Union Jack in their public facing materials, right? And so to see them, the thing is, it doesn't feel like an attack on Starmer or Labour. It feels like an attack on the nation state. That's honestly how I see it.
No, I think it's right. I mean, of course, the right wing don't like Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and we have good reasons to dislike him. There's nothing wrong with that. But it does feel like, doesn't it? I mean, they're willing to sort of, again, I use the word treachery, behave in a treacherous manner to almost get at Starmer. It's crazy to me. It's a strange episode in modern conservatism, but modern conservatism is a very strange thing, isn't it?
We should start accusing like the likes of Little John of treason. See how they like that.
Well, they do it to the left a lot, so
exactly.
It tastes their own medicine. Let's move on. Before we go on to our next story, I just want to say it is 2026, as we all know, and I was going to use my voice here. And we really want this year to be a big one for Turn Left. We want to be far more ambitious, way more than last year, and put us on the map. So in 2026, we'd like this to be a year we have a studio finally, and we can pay our contributors who we are currently working full time. But your support over the years has been, frankly, amazing. We've built up an excellent community. We've got people across social media. We've got a Discord. It's absolutely fantastic. But as you know, we rely on small donations. So if you want to be part of a media organization that seeks to destroy the oligarchs, then please head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can support us monthly on Patreon, or there is another link for a one-time contribution. You can also become a YouTube member for 99p. But on to our next story. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood raised eyebrows after she made comments regarding state surveillance on Monday in The Telegraph. Shabana Mahmood revealed that she wanted a system where the eyes of the state can be on you at all times, while invoking an enduringly controversial proposal by the 18th century philosopher Jeremy Bentham. In comments reported on Monday by The Telegraph, Mahmood said she wanted to use artificial intelligence for surveillance as she proposed Minority Report style policing. AI and technology can be transformative to the whole of the law and order space, said Home Secretary in an interview with former Prime Minister Tony Blair last month. When I was in justice, my ultimate vision for the part of the criminal justice system was to achieve, by means of AI and technology, what Jeremy Bentham tried to do with his panopticon. That is, that the eyes of the state can be on you at all times. The eyes of the states can be on you at all times. That is utterly chilling. Extremely chilling. Now, a government source tried to downplay her comments, yet ended up making it sound worse. A UK government source told The Telegraph this doesn't mean watching people who are non-criminals, but she feels like if you commit a crime, you sacrifice the right to the kind of liberty the rest of us enjoy. The entire point of freedom is everyone to have freedom. Otherwise, none of us are free. I mean, does that mean that, you know, once you commit a small crime, a small petty crime, you're now trapped for the rest of your life? Plus, this is always a gateway, right? They tell us, you know, it's all about keeping an eye on criminals, but ultimately it includes the rest of us, which is their plan. Police chiefs south of the border are also considering plans to use AI in a bid to predict whether crimes will happen, The Telegraph reports. In plans that echo the 2002 Steven Spielberg film Minority Report, police forces are looking at monitoring 1,000 men they believe pose the highest risk to women to predict whether they will commit crimes. Minority Report depicts a world where police can foresee crimes before they happen and arrest the would-be perpetrators. It is considered dystopian science fiction. That is insane. This is insanely scary. Now, on one hand, they're saying, look, if you're a criminal, you don't get to have the freedom and the liberties the rest of us enjoy, but don't worry, if you're not a criminal, you're fine. On the other hand, they're literally saying they're going to use AI to predict crime, and they're looking at men. So AI is going to build a portfolio, which, by the way, AI is often wrong. It often gives you wrong information. Just try ChatGPT. You'll see. They're going to build a model of 1,000 men they think are more likely to commit crimes or be a threat to women. Now, that opens the doors for any kind of things when it comes to characteristics. That opens the door for racism. You know, think about it. AI isn't actually artificial intelligence. It's LLM, large language models. So essentially what ChatGPT and others do is scour the internet for information, collates it for you and puts it in front of you. But of course, the internet is full of misinformation and lies. So there's many blogs, websites, media companies, particularly on the right wing, will put out or manipulate statistics that say black men are more dangerous, they commit more crimes. Okay, whether that's true or not, that's on the internet, and AI will pull that information thinking it's accurate. So we could have a scenario in which the British police is building a portfolio which is targeting black men because AI told them to do so. Now, by the way, this shouldn't just worry if you're a black man. This should worry everyone. The idea that we're going to use AI, which is, again, very, very inaccurate, to predict if you're going to commit a crime, that means all eyes of the state are on you at all times, regardless if you're innocent or not. We are moving towards a world of crime prediction with the use of AI, and it's being pushed by this government. Mahmood also references Jeremy Bentham's panopticon, in which inmates are seen at all times.
Panopticon. The panopticon is an architectural design proposed by Jeremy Bentham in the late 18th century. Here are some images of a panopticon. It's designed in a cylindrical manner with a tower in the middle. The central tower has windows that let the person inside it be able to see everyone that's in the outside ring of the building. The outside ring is divided into individual rooms or cells, so there is no communication between two individuals in separate rooms. These cells in the outer circle also let light in from the outside circle of the building, which has two effects simultaneously. It lets the person in the central watchtower to see everyone in the cells, but it does not allow the individuals in the cell to see who is in the watchtower.
Barry, these comments are really chilling. I mean, are you shocked, actually, that that's something Mahmood has said?
I was shocked when I saw the quote crossed my Twitter feed, and the one about the eyes of the state on you at all times. And I saw it and I read it again, and I read it again, and I thought, this can't be real. So I went to find a link to read the interview because I just couldn't believe that she would have thought that it was a good idea to say that. And especially to talk about the panopticon as well is I think this word is overused, but this is dystopian. What she's talking about is dystopian. And to reference the panopticon and the obvious comparisons to Minority Report, as you said, those are all sort of dystopian concepts, right? Like Minority Report is an actual, as you said, a work of dystopian science fiction, or one of those articles said. So I was shocked by it, and I think we should all be really, really worried about this. We're walking blindly into it as well as a country, and in other countries too, and there doesn't seem to be any pushback, and they make it sort of hard to push back for some politicians because they wrap it up in conversations about how it's going to make us safer, about how it's going to combat crime. I mean, to see them talking about how it's going to make women safer, right? That is a very, very difficult thing to argue against. But we know that it's not just about crime. We know that when governments are given surveillance powers for one thing, they very, very soon creep and they're used for many, many other things. And what we're in danger of losing is the right to privacy. I mean, that's one. I get incredibly annoyed almost when I walk around London and I see police facial recognition cameras and I know that they're scanning me. I find that an incredible invasion. Having said that, I have stupidly given my face to Apple to open my phone, and I really regret that I did that. So you have the right to privacy being threatened, which I think should be a sort of a fundamental right that we should protect. But then the other thing that really worries me about these new technologies being pushed by the government is the impact that it can have on dissent, right? We everything from the right to protest, right? We've already seen that under massive attack in this country. We've seen how they want to clamp down on the right to protest. Now imagine that they have the tech to track everybody who's ever gone to a protest, everybody who wants to continue to go on protests. Or look, we saw this in the US. I was living in the US during the BLM protests. I was living in Washington, D.C., and I remember the protests that happened there, how the protesters were trying to throw surveillance off. So they would wear, they wore masks that they thought could confuse AI. They obviously covered their faces. And then there was the notion that they could track phones. So if if your phone was at the protest, they could then track that phone back to your apartment or your house. So people started to leave phones at home. And then they were talking about, different phones that communicate with each other, and whether on and on and on, they can track you everywhere. So, okay, take the right to protest. That's one. But then when I zoom out, I actually worry about the ability in this world to rebel, to resist. Right? Sometimes, and I'm not just talking about Britain, I'm talking about this encroachment on the entire world. Sometimes governments need to be overthrown, right? Sometimes people need to stand up for their autonomy and fight for it. And soon, I worry that we're not going to be able to dissent in any way or shape. And that's what they want. And that's what we need to stand up against. And I think the scariest thing is, I don't really see a mass movement against this kind of tech right now, and I think it's sorely needed.
I agree. There isn't really a movement. Of course, there are organizations out there such as Big Brother Watch, but it doesn't get enough attention. I mean, interesting what you said about when it comes to sort of the private economy or private companies, like giving your face, your visual ID to Apple. And this is the inescapable world we live in. I mean, I read Cory Doctorow's book, Inshitification, and he actually talks about how companies lie about privacy. They'll say, actually, Apple have a really good privacy policy. They just blatantly lie. They use your information. And of course, that information can be sold to governments anyway. So it is everywhere. It feels unavoidable. But what we really need to have, we need to have an internet and tech bill of rights, because I agree with you when it comes to right to privacy. That shouldn't be just a slogan. I think that is a fundamental human right. Again, yeah, whether it's protesting, the right to resist authoritarian governments, it will be hard to do. Of course, many governments will tell you, well, we're not going to use this for bad things. But then you look at how Palestine Action, it's not even Palestine Action activists, it's people who hold a sign saying they support Palestine Action, right? If they're getting arrested for just holding a sign, what stops the government going, maybe we'll just arrest them for something they posted? I mean, what stopped them? They've got the power to do it, so why would they stop there? I also think beyond politics, if you can really say that, or people who are apolitical, I fundamentally believe in the right to privacy anyway, even if it's like, not about protecting your right to protest or resist, but just people should be allowed to walk through society without tech scanning your face. I think
100% agree. I know we talk about politics on this show, but park politics for a second, like you just did. Yeah. You're absolutely right. I can't walk through London without being tracked the entire way through. I can't get on the tube and travel somewhere. I can't, you can't move around, with any semblance of privacy. And again, I understand that, there are some benefits when it comes to tackling crime, but we're getting to the stage where those benefits are absolutely outweighing the negatives.
Yeah, and I think if we were to say, because a lot of people seem to have this idea that, well, if you do nothing wrong, you got nothing to worry about. I would say, imagine someone walks into your house, complete stranger, just breaks in or just walks in, starts taking pictures of you, taking videos of you, taking all your information, just left. You'd be like, what the fuck? Who are you? Why can you do this? We would rightfully be like, that's weird. Yet governments on an institutional level can effectively do that. Okay, they don't physically go into your house, but they don't need to. And I think when it's maybe sort of explained in that way, maybe people understand. But it's incredibly so scary. And also coming from a Labour government, which I actually think the Blairite wing of the Labour Party has been more authoritarian than Conservatives. At least there's a very small subsection of Conservatives who have that libertarian bent, right? Whereas Blair and the Blairites, it's a thing they're so obsessed with. They're more invested and passionate about using the state to clamp down on people than it is to end child poverty, for example. Like, this is a thing that they've wanted to do for a long time. Digital IDs is another part of it. And I think when it comes to Blairism, it's about weaponizing the states to clamp down on freedoms.
Yeah, and I think they were pushing national ID, not digital ID, but national ID as far back as the 90s, the Blairites, and it got dropped back then for various reasons, as we've just seen the U-turn on the digital ID, well, a semi-U-turn. But I don't know why they keep coming back to this, because there is pushback on that, right? I'm saying that there's not much pushback on the encroachment of surveillance technology, although, yes, there is Big Brother watch, but like you say, it doesn't really gain traction in the media or anything. But digital ID did, and digital ID was unpopular with the left and the right. So I think that they were scared politically away from the digital ID, which again makes me wonder why they're so obsessed with it as a policy. Like, surely they could have known that it would be very, very unpopular. And obviously there are huge reasons to be anti-digital ID, quite apart from the ones that we've already discussed, like privacy and the right to protest. Digital poverty, right? I read somewhere that about 4 million people in the UK don't have a smartphone. Right, what are they going to do? Are they going to give out 4 million smartphones so that people can access social services, so that people can apply for jobs, homeless people, etc.? I mean, there are all kinds of social reasons why a digital ID is a bad idea. So now what do we have? We have the right to privacy, which is huge. We have the right to dissent, which is huge. We have problems with creating a two-tier system, which is huge. There are so many reasons for the country not to go down this road.
I agree. And also, I do think people do throw around the term 1984 a lot, but this is a very good example of it. Let's park that there and go on to our final story of the evening. Yesterday, the Israeli Defense Force attacked a UN building in East Jerusalem. UNRWA, which stands for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, is being bulldozed by the IDF as they claim the land that building sits on belongs to Israel. They once again claims that UNRWA has been infiltrated by Hamas. UNRWA issued a statement, and here are some excerpts. A new level of open and deliberate defiance of international law, including of the privileges and immunities of the United Nations by the State of Israel. Early this morning, Israeli forces stormed the headquarters, the United Nations site in East Jerusalem. Bulldozers entered the compound and began demolishing buildings inside it under the watch of lawmakers and a member of government. This constitutes an unprecedented attack against the United Nations agency and its premises. On January the 14th, Israeli forces stormed into UNRWA Health Center in East Jerusalem and ordered it to close. Water and power supplies to UNRWA facilities, including health and education buildings, are also scheduled to be cut in the coming weeks. This is a direct result of legislation passed by the Israeli parliament in December, which stepped up existing anti-UNRWA laws adopted in 2024. This must be a wake-up call. What happens today to UNRWA will happen tomorrow to any other international organization or diplomatic mission, whether in the occupied Palestinian territory or anywhere around the world. Now, Stop Anti-Semitism Twitter account replied underneath and said this: "Your employees kidnapped Jews on the 10th of October. Your organization is the biggest obstacle to peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Dismantle UNRWA." Quite ironic to say that UNRWA is the biggest obstacle to peace and not the Israeli state committing genocide. What an insane and wild thing to say. So what grounds does Israel have to bulldoze UNRWA? UN premises are protected under international treaty, making them immune from search, requisition, expropriation, and any other form of interference. But Israel says that those protections have been made null and void because of its allegation that UNRWA staff were involved in the 7th of October 2023 Hamas-led attacks. That's right, absolutely nothing. And as always, Israel ignores international law and does what it pleases. Barry, what measures do you think, if any, the UN can take, or are they completely powerless here?
Well, there are measures, but they won't be enacted, right? And let's be clear, what they are doing is illegal under international law. First, the assertion that the UNRWA headquarters is on Israeli territory, it's not. And that's recognized by international law because it's in East Jerusalem, which is recognized as illegally occupied by Israel. Right, so there's one violation of international law. It is not on Israeli territory. It is in occupied territory. Second, Israeli is a signatory to the Convention on the Privileges and Immunities of the United Nations, which Israel signed in 1946, which says that UN facilities are out of bounds. Right, so it's violated international law there also. So that's two clear violations of international law that I don't think are debatable in any way. When a state attacks, and actually just one more point, even if it was Israeli territory, it's still a violation of international law to interfere with a UN facility in your own state. So even if it was Israel, which it's not, it would still be a violation of international law. So the only recourse that the UN has when this happens is usually the Security Council, right? It's the Security Council that will be the main arm of the UN that would take action in a situation like that. And that could be things like sanctions, it could be diplomatic isolation, but we know that that is not going to happen at the Security Council level. We know that that's never going to happen at the Security Council level. The General Assembly can kind of condemn, declare it illegal. That probably will happen, but nothing material will happen. And that's the reality. Right. And what we've seen over the last more than 2 years is that Israel can violate international law again and again and again, and nothing happens and nobody will ever hold it to account. Because the reality, the sad reality, as much as we keep stating international law, and we should continue to state international law, and we should continue to call them out when they violate international law, like I say that they have done twice with this bulldozing of UNRWA, is that it only exists for some, it only ever has existed for some, and for others, such as Israel, it just doesn't exist at all. I mean, even look at the ICC. Up until a couple of recent cases, for the entire existence of the ICC, only Africans were prosecuted there. That's it. Nobody from outside of the continent of Africa was ever prosecuted in the ICC until very recently. And to me, that was always such a great example of the lopsidedness of this concept of international law and how it will never, ever apply to great powers. And it's just sad to say that's the case here. Nothing's going to happen.
It's depressing to hear, but it's true. It's the reality of the situation. I think is also important, and you brought it up when it came to the ICC. Like, a lot of these institutions are very Western baked, created by the West, created by the US. I feel like this almost ties into kind of what Trump's been saying recently, that how he kind of wants to get rid of the UN and build a new international order, which is, again, I think it's quite ironic, because it's not like the UN really holds these countries to account. They're quite slow. Even when we have procedures in place, countries ignore them. The US will kidnap Maduro. Israel will commit genocide and annex land, and they'll ignore them. So, I mean, it feels that we are utterly powerless, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's really strange that he would want to create a new institution, because, as you say, the UN is quite toothless, and the US has obviously a veto on the Security Council, and then even when you look at some of the humanitarian arms of the UN, for example, the World Food Programme is essentially controlled by the US. So even when it comes to aid agencies within the UN, who, by the way, we know can be leveraged for political ends and have been, the US is in control there too. So I just don't see any threat from the UN to the ability of the US to do what it wants to do on the international stage, or to the ability of Israel to do what it wants on the international stage, or, to the ability of any of the US's dwindling band of allies to do what they want to do on the international stage. I actually think he just gets ticked off when people stand up at the General Assembly and criticize him. I think that's enough for him to want to shut down the whole organization. But no, what we need, and what, again, I hate to be pessimistic, but what we need is a reformed UN with some teeth. But I don't see how that's going to happen in the current climate.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. Sadly, I wish I could disagree with you, but I agree. Okay, let's leave that story there and go to our comments. I believe we've got Callum as our producer today. Also, apologies to everyone today. My voice has got a bit funny, so I think I sound a bit vocal fry.
Hello. Yes, it's definitely not Sarah, and it's definitely not Lewis. Although, where was the love for Cog? Come on, guys. I think they said that Cog would have been wouldn't have used as many exclamation marks as me, which is probably true. Let us have a look then. So we will start obviously with the super chats. Michael gifted 1 turn left membership to Carlton. Thank you very much for that. Mr. Navatron gifted 10 turn left memberships. Thank you so much for those. Bloody Blah gifted 50 turn left.
Bloody hell.
Thank you. That's an insane
We'll be getting
number.
that studio this year, I think. Thank you.
If this carries on, we will.
I know. It'd be nice to have Barry in the studio rather than all at home,
Yeah. Andrina gifted 5 turn left memberships. Thank you so much. And James Holmes also gifted 5 as well. Thank you so much, James.
So much.
As always, we really appreciate the support that you guys give. So, yeah. James today said something very interesting. Interested to know what you will think of this. James says, you know what it is, Curtis? Europe, in the heads of the right broadly, represents emasculation. The United States, brash and obnoxious though it is, represents strength and access to power. What do you both make of that analysis?
I think I agree with that, actually. I think the way the language is used from people on the right, that European leaders are weak and Trump is strong, although there is an element of truth to that, but it's not it's not an inherent trait of being European or at least being in the EU. But I do feel like there is that kind of sense that United States is brash and strong like Trump, which is a tenet of far right and fascist politics.
I think it's a great point. I actually think it's spot on, and I've seen it memed. As you say, there is a bit of truth in it, especially when it comes to Europe's reliance on the US for its security. I think that's something that's real about it, but there is this kind of almost vibe about it too, which you see online a lot, and you see people on the right pushing online a lot. So there was something I saw on Twitter or somewhere the other day that had China and the US and had all the things that China and the US were developing. So it was like AI, arms, this. And then in Europe, it just said regulation.
Yes.
So like to say Europe is being left behind and Europe's weak and Europe dawdles and doesn't know what it's doing. And there's an element of truth to it, but it's massively weaponized by the right. And I think James is spot on, and you actually see it. It might be one of the attractions, probably is one of the attractions that, as we were discussing earlier, people on the right have towards Trump and MAGAism right now. And also, sorry to throw this in, but also like the manosphere, right? And the nonsense that we see, the swagger of the kind of manosphere influencers, and how they look up to Trump and talk about Trump as some kind of a hero. And a lot of it is about that kind of weird idea of masculinity that they have with this swagger and the cigars and the way that they meme Trump as like some big cowboy and stuff. So yeah, I think that's a factor.
Well, I mean, Trump and Farage both have publicly spoken highly of the likes of Andrew Tate and other influencers within the manosphere. So this idea that kind of sort of toxic masculinity and sort of gender-based toxicity is then projected onto a wider political landscape makes perfect sense. And that's why I thought it was interesting. That's why I highlighted it. Graham said, "Don't worry, guys, don't worry. The UN strongly condemn the destruction of UNRWA's HQ. Not to worry." Whew. Thought we were in for some bother then. It's a running theme, this, isn't it? Of strong condemnation, but never any action.
Hamish Falconer from the British Foreign Office was appalled today.
Well, thank you. I know it's great. It's what technocratic pen pushers do. They feel like strong words is enough, not actions.
Yeah. It's utterly pointless. I see Falconer tweeting things like this on the regular. Where he replied to somebody inadvisedly on Twitter a few weeks ago, where the UN had been talking about the aid being blocked from getting in, and as winter drew down on Gaza, they couldn't get shelter materials in, and babies have died from exposure and hypothermia in the last few weeks, and Israel still refuses to let those supplies in. Falconer sent out a tweet sort of saying, the UK urges da 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 da. Somebody replied to him to say, you guys are complicit. And he said, "I'm sorry, did you not read my tweet? I've urged." It was awful. He was saying, "I'm sorry, I'm urging her."
I didn't read your strongly worded tweet. I apologize. Oh, peak liberalism there.
It really is. Seri has said, just in response to Stop Anti-Semitism, Stop Anti-Semitism, the movement, are pathetic. They don't want to stop anti-Semitism at all. And they smeared Miss Rachel as Anti-Semite of the Year. I know we covered that on the show. Again, I feel like I say this every week now, but the constant demonization of any criticism of the actions of Israel as anti-Semitic is undermining real anti-Semitism, and it belittles genuine instances of anti-Semitism by I'm lost for words, which doesn't happen to me very often because I feel like I'm always saying the same thing. But you know exactly what I'm saying when we pretend that criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic. what you are actually doing is you are lumping the entire Jewish community in the same basket as the genocidal war criminals within the IDF and the Israeli government, and that in and of itself is anti-Semitic.
Exactly. They're conflating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, which is anti-Semitic to do.
Yes.
100%.
You worded it much better than I did.
The thing is, I'm glad they're doing this, and I'm glad that, because it was either stop anti-Semitism or campaign against anti-Semitism that put Miss Rachel up as a candidate for anti-Semite of the year. I want them to continue to do that, because your average person will look at Miss Rachel and go, "Wow, she makes videos about children, and one of the videos was an amputee, Palestinian amputee. What a lovely woman! How can she be an anti-Semite?" It just undermines their own point. I'm very happy for them to continue to do this, because it exposes these people as not being serious about tackling real anti-Semitism in society. It's clearly a ruse for Zionism and pro-Israel sentiment. So they can continue doing that all they want.
Yeah. On to state surveillance. Ryan Feathers brought up a really interesting point, which is they'll be able to just generate shit to be used against you anyway. I mean, we are at the point, and I don't know if this is an argument in favor of using AI as state surveillance or against it, but we are getting to that point if we're not already. Well, we're already there with the capabilities of AI, where if anybody wants to incriminate you, all they have to do is type something into a chatbot, and 30 seconds later they'll have CCTV footage of doing something that you never did. So, I mean, is there a way? Is there a way back from this? I mean, I'm all for regulation of AI. I think it should be banned in terms of public use, and I think it should only be used for research purposes, for things like medical research, scientific research, and very little else. But have we passed the point of no return, do you think?
I actually fully agree with you. I would ban generative AI tomorrow. I cannot see any positive use case for that technology. Any. And it's so dangerous that people can generate clips of, as Ride Feather says there, they could generate clips to use against opponents or anyone, Palestine Action, say. But also to see fake videos of politicians, of news broadcasts. I saw one that a lot of people in India believed a few weeks ago, where they had faked up a Sky News broadcast about India, Pakistan, and a lot of people sort of fell for it. And that's absolutely terrifying. What is a positive use case for generative AI? Just ban it. And I agree with you that, the positive use cases are the grand lofty claims that they've made. It's going to solve climate change. It's going to cure cancer. Look, I don't know how true that is, but if there's a chance that it could cure disease, yes, let's let that happen. But let's heavily regulate all the other stuff. Again, I hate to be, Barry bring down on the buzz killers, like what I said about international law. I don't know if we're too far gone, because there's an AI arms race going on right now. That's the problem. Like, is a country going to come along and heavily regulate AI while they're worried that they're going to be overtaken by competing countries and firms? And that's my worry. I don't know if the will would be there to regulate it, but I completely agree with Callum. Ban it.
There's no will to regulate it, and that's the problem. So we're already far behind. But Barry, I say ban it. Just ban it outright. I don't see any social use. And a lot of people come back to me and say, well, we can use it for healthcare. We can use it for research. I don't even buy that argument, because as I was explaining earlier, LLMs give you wrong information. I was trying ChatGPT out the other day because I was trying to work out something in a piece of software. I wanted to find out the answer and how I could fix it. After about 30 minutes of going back and forth, I realized it was just telling me the wrong thing. It was giving me incorrect information. And then I just went on Reddit and I found out the information I needed and fixed the problem right away. Good old Reddit, right?
I had the same thing, Curtis, actually. I was writing an article on the Irish famine, and I was trying to find primary sources from sort of the 1800s, because I knew that there had been some sort of journalists who there was one guy from Scotland in particular who had come to Ireland and had witnessed the famine and had written letters about it, and I think compiled a book about it. So I was trying to find quotes from his book, and I was struggling a little bit. on Google. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, can you do a deep dive? I'm looking for quotes from this particular journalist about it. Can you find me links? It came back, it did a summary where it said, here are the quotes. They were all fake.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I'd asked it for the link. So I went and clicked the link and I saw these are different quotes. It just made up a quote. And had I not checked the link, I would have published a made up quote from an LLM.
Which
And
is
by the
very
way, that's
dangerous in
happening.
journalism.
People are taking it as read and not going and checking on the link. But again, it's like you say, when it does something like that, you do think, how the hell is this going to cure cancer?
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, I can see the use of when it comes to collating information, because that is super fast. Saying, find me a quote about this, that's really, really good. I can see how people would like to use that in terms of research.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is you can't be sure if it's correct. You were given wrong quotes. Again, my issue, it was giving me wrong information, for example, but there will be people who would take it at face value. So,
but even sorry to interrupt you, Curtis, but on the AI point of the surveillance, which was the main story,
yeah, of course,
even the face recognition AI gets it wrong. I mean, we've already seen examples across the globe of people being wrongly detained by police officers and other law enforcement because they've been flagged up on an AI face recognition software as being the person they're looking for, and it turns out that it's not the right person, and you could argue, as people have done, and as you alluded to earlier, there is the whole thing, well, if you're doing wrong, you've got nothing to hide. But that can be extremely traumatic for someone, for people to be detained. And it's also happened where people have been not just stopped and searched, but where people have been violently apprehended by law enforcement because they've mistaken an individual for someone very dangerous, and they've launched at them, they've thrown into them to the ground. They may have been tasered, they've been manhandled, they've been put in cuffs, they've been screamed at, yelled at, put in the back of a van, and then all for it to come out that, oh, actually the software got it wrong, you just happen to look a little bit like this other person, and the AI didn't quite tell the difference. Like it's so insane and really dangerous. I actually think on the generative AI thing, I think that generative AI is more dangerous than social media. And obviously there's all the talks at the moment about banning social media for under 16s. In fact, I think we've just seen that the Lords have just passed an amendment, actually, just while we've been on air, to include that in some legislation. That could still be overturned by MPs in the House of Commons, though. But there's all this conversation about, well, should we ban social media for under 16s? And nobody's, apart from the brief thing about Grok, where they've now said, okay, it's going to be illegal to use generative AI to make sexually explicit images of people. Well, brilliant, that's good, that's a step in the right direction, but we shouldn't have it at all. We just need to ban it all outright. Interestingly, Universe has said that Labour can afford AI that, quotes, predicts crimes, but can't afford nationalisation of the water. Shake my head.
Yes, very ironic, isn't it? Very ironic.
Like, we're finding the money for all this AI, but we can't do something basic.
I mean, I suppose the more we continue with AI, we don't need to nationalise water because we'll run out of it. Because all the water's been dried up by trying to build AI. Yeah. So
every time I mention you use ChatGPT, I feel guilty. Sorry, Curtis, I feel guilty. Like when I said to you there, I used it to research an article on the Irish famine, I thought, oh Christ, and then I'm contributing to, how many cups of water did I use to find that quote? And it was wrong.
To be fair, if we all use it loads and loads and loads over the next week or two, then Greenland will just melt, and then Trump won't be able to take over it. So no, I shouldn't joke about that. Global warming is a very serious thing. Yeah, I mean, there's loads of you had comments on this. I mean, we could be here all night looking at them all, but the general feeling is obviously that people don't think it's a good idea. Sly Loris has said politicians always learn the wrong lessons from art. Oh, look, a dystopian world. That concept seems like a good idea.
I was thinking that earlier. I was like, oh, when we watch films like Minority Report, they're cautionary tales, whereas I think these people go, oh, it's an instruction manual. Okay, I'll do
and
that.
Also, I don't want to do the whole stereotypical slippery slope argument thing, but there is also another element here of if any legislation that's brought in now makes things easier down the line if we end up in a situation where we've got a more extreme government. And obviously, I'm thinking of the likes of Reform UK and what they might do. But actually, it works both ways. I don't want any government, left or right, to have so much power that they've got their eyes on me at all times. Like, that is just mental. And like you say, Curtis, I completely support the right to privacy. And if Labour head in that direction while they're in power now, how could that be used? Even if they do just use it, even if they just use it solely for fighting crime and it doesn't affect anyone that's not done anything wrong, and let's say it works 100% of the time and it's perfect and it only ever gets bad people. In 5 years' time, once we've had another election, will or 10 or whatever, will a future government continue to use it in that way, or will they say, well, we're already legally allowed to do it, so let's take it one step further?
Yeah, they will. They will.
Right, moving on. Arthur Bumblefoot has said Richard Littlejohn was reportedly earning £1 million a year 20 years ago. Why is it always those who are financially comfortable in life telling the rest what is best? They haven't a clue. Any thoughts on that?
100%. Absolutely. I cannot believe that man was getting paid £1 million 20 years ago.
Exactly, because it's a lot of money anyway. But 20 years ago, it would have been even more, wouldn't it? But even if you're going to be in a position to write for the Daily Mail, you're already pretty out of touch, aren't you? We do not live in a meritocracy. The richest people in society, the most rewarded, are the biggest idiots or those who want to wreak harm on people. We do not have a meritocracy. And
it's a spot on point. Like, it's actually a really serious point, isn't it? That because we see the same from comfortable, privileged politicians who don't have a clue how most people in the country live.
And the Hove Heretic has said the idea of the same people who dragged us out of the EU citing sovereignty now spouting treason is vomit-inducing. It was bloody obvious they were hypocritical liars before Lemming Thursday.
Yeah.
Which I just thought was an interesting point worth highlighting. I'm just aware of time, so just on Stella Creasy, Dalek 604 has said she is very present in Walthamstow. That's the one thing that she has in her favour. And Vicky said, Labour love claiming people are being abusive and emotional and not responding to points made when it's usually them doing that and people simply calling them out with facts and figures. And I just wanted to ask about this one from Be Real, what your thoughts are on this. I agree with Zach, except we do need a nuclear deterrent, but one that operates independently of the US. France has, so can't we follow suit? It's a difficult balance, but the worst part was Brexit.
Yeah, there's some talk that Britain could cooperate with France instead. It still leaves the problem that you're reliant on you're reliant on your interests aligning, but it is an option that people have spoken about over the years. The problem with, I think, pursuing the independent nuclear deterrent is the money involved is absolutely astronomical. As much as Trident costs a huge amount of money in maintenance, to start it fresh and to go completely independent would take an incredibly long time and be very expensive. So I think that some people look at France as kind of a cheaper option, whether there are so for example, missiles that France has that can be sort of retrofitted to work with the 4 submarines that Britain has, etc. So there is a lot of discussion about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's among the left as well, more of a discussion. I think historically, majority of the left, me included, were supportive of unilaterally disarming our nuclear weapons. I think I'm becoming a bit nuanced myself. I'm still open to hearing arguments, if I'm honest, and I'm open to be convinced. But I am seeing more of a discussion, and I think more and more people, even on the left, are thinking maybe we should have them. However, the logical step would be to go fully independent, and the problem with going to France is you do have that same problem. Yes, it's expensive, but I suppose in that way, if the discussion is about going fully independent with Trident and the costs involved, that might actually boost the unilateral disarmament movement, because they might say, well, if we're going to do all of this, we may just get rid of them. So I think there needs to be a national conversation about this. Unfortunately, there won't be, because I do think, same with NATO, that such things are politically toxic. You know, the majority of people in this country want us to stay in NATO, and I would say majority of people probably want to keep Trident. It's something that might be very difficult for the Greens. I know their manifesto says to give up nukes, but I mean, if Zach Polanski started polling 25% and had a real shot at being, I don't know, in a coalition, or even, let's just say, a prime minister with a minority Green party, you know, are they really going to pursue the policy of getting rid of Trident, at least without a referendum? You know, I think that policy was suited for them when they were a very small party, but they are serious now, and they have to bring people along with them when it comes to scrapping Trident. I think it's all up in the air, if you ask me.
I agree with that. That'll be a huge attack line. You know, I'm sure the majority of British people are in favor of keeping nuclear weapons, and I'm sure the majority of British people are in favor of staying in NATO. I think Zach Polanski has taken some flack from the left, right, because he didn't say that Britain should immediately pull out of NATO. He said at some point in the future. He didn't say right away. And you know, this thing that always happens in election time when there's a left-wing candidate, which is they're asked, would they press the button?
Oh god!
Like they I think they did this with Corbyn, but they did this with Ed Miliband too. And it's always like, "Are you tough? Would you press the button?" And it's like, "I'd smash that button. I'd hit 2 buttons." You know, everybody has to get out there and say, "I'm willing to destroy the world." You know,
that was who was it? Lib Dem leader in 2019.
Tim Farron.
No, a woman.
Not Layla Moran.
No.
Oh yes, she said that
Joe
she could.
Swinson.
Yeah, the one who
Joe
said there was a
Swinson.
good chance she could become prime minister. Yeah.
Yeah, and they asked her the question, and she was scarily enthusiastic. She was like, "Oh, I pushed that button straight away." Like, even some politicians tactically say, "Well, you know, I have to." She was like, "Hell yeah, give me that button."
Yeah. Give it to me right now. Ding, ding, ding. Like, that's how they're expected to respond to that question. You know, so yeah, it's a difficult one. But I agree with you. It actually is, even if for people on the left, it is a very nuanced conversation, and it would take a lot of thinking and a lot of discussion and a lot of time.
Well, listen, thank you both very much. I think we're probably going to have to call it there on the comments. I'll leave you all with the news that's just coming to us from one of the other team members. This has come from Lewis, that Davos has been evacuated while an investigation goes on into a strange smell that is causing people to cough. It's probably all the hot air. But yeah, so obviously... to keep a lookout for any developments on that news, but an evacuation has happened while we've been live on air. So
thank you so much, Callum, and thank you. Interesting. Of course, thank you to all our comments. Of course, that is all we have time for. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and thank you so much, Barry, once again. It's always a pleasure having you on.
I enjoyed coming on, Curtis. Thanks so much.
Now, remember to like this stream, and if you're not a subscriber, then hit that button. If you want us to grow, then you can head over to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There is a link to our Patreon where you can support us monthly, or follow the other link to give us a one-time contribution. Alternatively, you can become a YouTube member for just 99p. Thank you so much to everyone that tuned in. Thank you to all the donations. I'm Curtis Daly, and I'll see you next time.